So yeah, I'm going to talk about building links relatively passively. I've been involved in content of some description for about 13 years. I was a freelance copywriter initially. I got into SEO by accident because people kept asking me about SEO. I was like, why are you saying the alphabet at me? Better go figure it out. I took a trainee role, was going to do a year there. 9 years later, finally went freelance. So I've been involved in this kind of stuff for about 12, 13 years. But this particular kind of content we're talking about today, this digital PR type content, was about 8 years ago I got involved in that. And to be honest, I wanted one thing and one thing only. That was it, really. Wasn't overly bothered about what anybody else got out of it. But obviously when you start doing this and you start getting content that goes live in the press and then accidentally it gets picked up on TV and before you know it, people are talking about it on the radio and stuff, you start to see all these other benefits too. It might not be as easy to communicate to a finance director the value of hundreds of thousands of people talking about you, but there has to be a value, right? Nonetheless, despite my aggressive pursuit of links, the biggest benefit I actually personally found from getting into this kind of content is that it became really easy to explain to my nan what I do for a living. I gave up trying to explain SEO 2 years in, the 4th time she asked me whether Google prints t-shirts. And we talk about these linkable assets a lot when we come from a bit of an SEO angle with content. And we sell it in to clients or stakeholders based on the fact that we're going to generate these big linkable assets that are going to have a direct impact on your overall site's SEO. And yeah, when you actually do nail something and it goes live on tons of different websites and hundreds of thousands of people are talking about it, sharing it, you're getting links from all over the place, you can be pretty confident that what you've done is brilliant. You've smashed your promotion and your content's awesome. Deserves a drink, or 5. But if, when you stop doing your outreach, that stops generating links, if the only thing generating links is you emailing people constantly, then is it really a linkable asset with any long-term value? So that's what I want to talk about today, is what happens afterwards when you've finished doing your active outreach, when your attention wanes to the next project. Because in an ideal world, right, we could carry on doing promotion for a great piece of content forever. We could go until we've exhausted every single avenue possible. But we have contracts, clients, budgets, time limitations. So in the real world, we move on. As a bit of preparation for this, rather than just basing it all on my own experience, I did a little survey. So just on Google Forms, just email and Twitter to get people to take it, and 103 people did, so thank you if you're amongst those 103, to find out a little bit about what people are actually doing outreach-wise. I'll share the deck later with a link to the raw data download. There's quite a bit of information there. But I just want to focus on 3 areas today that are quite pertinent to this what happens after bit. In terms of the breakdown of people who took part, 62% agency, 27% in-house, 10% freelance, and someone who answered with that they're working on their own website. 59% of people who answered this survey say that they do their outreach all in one go and as quickly as possible. So for the majority, outreach is kind of like a one-off hit that happens, when you launch your content? There's quite a high proportion. If you do go and look at the raw data download, some of people's individual answers are quite interesting. I like the do it for as long as it takes within reason, because I tried putting within reason in a contract once and legal didn't like it. But for most people, it's kind of got a one-off feel to it. Only 22% of people who answered this say they go back to a project, often or always, to re-outreach later or re-promote it. And the breakdown for that is there. So 40% rarely, 28.2% sometimes. For 10%, it's just never even an option. And obviously there's all kinds of reasons for that: contracts, retainers, resource. But this one's the one that probably surprised me the most. Of the 103 people that answered this survey, only 25% say that they're consistently hitting their targets, whatever targets they may be. So for 56.6, it's sometimes, which I'm going to interpret as, I'm interpreting that as, well, I hit them as much as I don't. For 17.2% rarely, 22.2 said often. We had a couple of all the times, and nobody said never. And there's all kinds of different reasons for this. Some people get set very, very, very unreasonable targets. Some people have no resource. Some people are being handed content without any say in it that is shit. But for 3/4 of people, whatever the reasons, for 3/4 of people involved in this, whether or not they hit targets is hit or miss on a good day. This is when I start pushing it with data. So if you're involved in sort of, assessing the credibility of data sets, it's probably a good time to ignore me for a bit. I started pushing it with the data a little bit to assess whether success rates are higher amongst people who do revisit old content more. And it would appear so. So here's the big caveat on this. When I went through the responses and I pulled out just people who revisit old content often or always, and then excluded the ones who don't set targets, there were quite a few of those, I was only left with 19 people. I appreciate I'm pushing it, but it's quite interesting. Over half of those people say they're hitting their targets often or always. And if you want to look at very specific responses, the 5 people who set targets and say they revisit old content all the time, 4 out of 5 of them are hitting theirs often. And one of them was one of the 2 people who said that they hit theirs all the time. This could be a complete coincidence, but kind of ties in with my experience over the last few years of dealing with content. The most successful projects I've worked on have been the ones that have had months or years to gather links, long after the initial launch phase. This one from 2014 that I've talked about before, so I won't go into detail. Very, very simple smartphone study. I say promotion starts there, it doesn't. I mean, the promotion probably started about 2 months prior to this going live when I started emailing journalists to ask their opinion on what I was thinking of doing, asking whether they would like me to ask a question on this survey on their behalf. And ran with the outreach for about 2 months. The last month there, the February 2015, was, frankly, it was mostly just chasing up loose ends, tying up a few links with unlinked mentions and whatnot. And then a year later, that was actually pretty good for us. It represented quite good value for money, very, very little input in the grand scheme of things. But a year later, with no input, the number of referring domains there is trebled with 0 work, which seems like a pretty good deal, but now I look back and think, you moron, why did you not do some work? And then today. So it's starting to stagnate a little bit now. I've had 3.5 years of doing literally nothing on that piece of content for it to continue to grow. And those kinds of graphs, for me, is how content should be. There should be a big active launch phase, and in reality, a lot of us are kind of going to be forced in to be most active on launch or around launch or over a phased period of time within those months following launch. But if something's truly a linkable asset, then it's going to generate value over time. Last 30 days, again, covered in The Atlantic with another link. This isn't people talking about the study, it's people citing it as a source. Similarly, start of this year, very, very simple project, very simple, just statistics on stress based on a survey with a very limited active promotional window. And the active promotion on this was done by Hannah Bednarova, who's also freelance. And very time restricted, next project's ready to go, but kind of starting to not matter because every time she secured another link, we started seeing more and more traction, more visibility, and the links are going up. I'm not measured on what happens to that content in 3 months or 6 months. The time at which I go in and talk about the value of that content is a year after launch. And I know what it sounds like I'm saying. It sounds like I'm saying when I stop working on something, it gets better. Not really. So it's the things that you do before you launch that affect how much value you're going to get after you finish working. And it's how successful your active outreach, the most active bit of the work that you do, is that will determine how much that is too, how successful you are. So I want to share a few tactics that I've been using that have been the most successful. And the first one, it amazes me how many of us are SEOs, and the second we start doing digital PR stuff, like we just lose our SEO hats. We spend a ton of time crafting these attention-grabbing headlines, creative email subject lines, and quite rightly, the main job when you're doing outreach is to get people to at least look at what you're saying and act on it. But they're not always written to rank. I've had no involvement with this company or project, but I really like it. So this is runrepeat.com, and it's a running affiliate website. And they did a study that I think the headline on is awesome. American runners have never been slower, and they called it a mega study. which feels like it has power. And it probably was a mega study. They assessed millions of run finishers records going right back to 1902. So it is a mega study. It's great. So I know one of the competitor sites to these, and they estimated that they spent 2 or 3 months on outreach, which would take you to about there. This is pretty timeless content. It's study-based. People always need sources. And actually, since it launched, nothing's really happened. It's kind of stagnated, which is a shame, because they had a statistician involved in this. They analysed millions of records. It's not the kind of thing you can turn around in 10 minutes. So, a few problems. It gets outranked for its headline by its own coverage. Not its biggest problem. It's optimised for American runners, basically, if we look at this from an SEO point of view. And to be fair, in the UK, it ranks 4th for that. In the US, it ranks 5th. And it's quite a big keyword. But if you search American runners, Google reckons what you want is a list of American runners or some photographs. Some advertiser thinks that if you search American runners, you want a carpet for your stairs. And you can't get that on runrepeat.com, funnily enough. So why? Why are they ranking for that? Why not just optimize? These people probably want what they've got. The 10,000 people every month who search average marathon times, the 300 people every month who search for running statistics, marathon running speeds, all of those are queries where people's probably looking for a source to link back to. And it's a simple change. If they rank for American runners, a few tweaks to that page would probably have them ranking for these things. Similarly for us, some pretty headlines were based around statistics. For us, 85% of Brits are stressed. The blog post title was just very, very simply, this is what it is. But no one searches Great Britain and stress. 10 people search how bad is stress. They probably don't want a study. But 2,400 people a month do search for stress statistics. A few hundred stress statistics UK, all kinds of variants. And yet, stress statistics UK can be number 1 for, with nothing fancy there beyond basic on-page optimization and good outreach at the start. 4th, behind 3 HSE listings, by the way. Who needs 3 listings? Stress Statistics 2018. This is the Search Console position data for that particular landing page. You don't launch in position 1. This website's got very little authority. It's a website that sells biomarker tracking, and one of the key biomarkers is cortisol, hence the stress relevance. But it's not as authoritative as the HSE. It's not been around as long as some of the mental health publications that are talking about this topic. So when we launched, for most of these keywords, around about page 3. Every time Hannah secured another link, we'd see a bit of a jump. And the result for that is that actually we're getting a ton of traffic now from keywords that imply people actually looking for a study, or a piece of research. People looking for statistics and data generally look for sources. Good writers link to their sources. People who don't link to their sources are bastards. And this works for non-proprietary data too. This is crap. Sorry if anyone works for the Priory. But the Priory ranks number 3 for eating disorder statistics. And this has got a 100-word introduction, and then it's got a few bullet points. I didn't fit them all on the screenshot. I got bored. It's got a few bullet points. There's no value added there. These statistics are taken from other sources. And when you look at the links there, granted, it's only 20 domains, but it's 20 domains more than practically all blog posts ever get linking to their site. It's just statistics taken from other places. And people are linking to them as the source because they rank for it, probably based on the strength of their overall domain. I quite like this one, petsecure.com.au, Australian pet insurance website. Ranks the 3rd in the UK, 5th in the US, and 1st in Australia for pet ownership statistics. They've just compiled data. That's it. They've just compiled data, made it look a bit prettier, added a bit more value, certainly, than the Priory did. And as a result of that, they've got 66 referring domains to this page. This is that piece of content over the last year. So when you look into what those links are, again, this doesn't look like coverage that's been secured through press releases. It's just people citing them as a source. I would hazard a guess they're doing literally no work on that right now. So whatever it is that you've got, whether it's data-driven, whether it's a big visual with no data background, just treat it the same way you would the service pages that you're optimizing for your clients, and work out exactly what someone's searching where that thing is the best answer. For the study about American runners isn't the best query for that particular piece of content at all. You've probably already got keyword tools you're using. Keyword Finder, answerthepublic.com are always a pretty good shout. Now we're getting a bit less passive. This is why I said relatively passive link building. The first one, you can literally do nothing and build links after you've done all the heavyweight lifting first, of course. This is a little bit more resource intensive. Over the course of a campaign, we tend to produce a ton of different assets. It's video content, sound content, and in particular, imagery. So whether it's an infographic or a bank of photographs, or you get a set of icons, whatever it is that you've produced, you can then release under Creative Commons licensing later for usage. You can just mark it up on your page, if you like, or you can do it the easy way and let Flickr do it for you. Upload to Flickr, optimize a title, optimize a description, put a request in for where you'd like the links to go, and yeah, you could sit back and just wait for people to link. In reality, I think people are a bit crap with attribution, particularly with Creative Commons. We kind of think we can just get away with it. So track usage. Track usage over time, and when, as you invariably do find, people are not crediting the right way, go and chase them and ask them nicely if they wouldn't mind just updating the link to the original source. Pixie.com will chase those for you. Their business model actually is helping you to claim sort of any money that you're owed from people using your fully copyrighted images. I've spoken to them because I'm kind of just using their resource and, you know, they can't get 10% of a link. And they have no intention yet in the immediate term, apparently, of monetizing this particular aspect of it, and they said they're quite happy for me to continue using it for tracking. Slightly more input required is monitoring the mentions of topics where a revisit is genuinely impactful. I hate Google alerts. It doesn't matter what I put in a Google alert, I get spam. And then I stop reading them because I just see Google Alerts emails and I get irrationally angry. So I use Talkwalker alerts. There's a ton of other ones as well, Fresh Web Explorer. There's loads of options out there. Don't put really broad keywords in here. If you put stress in an alerts tool, you're going to get emailed every time Theresa May stresses that everything's really okay. It's irrelevant. So you're looking for things like Stress Awareness Week or stress data, or maybe some sort of celebrity names related to stress or workplace stress. Set up a separate email address so you never have to see these things when you're trying to do something else because it does make you irrationally angry. Set up a separate email address, spend a little bit of time every now and then, depending on what resource you've got available, just going through and taking a look and seeing whether there's anything genuinely worth going after later. Don't waste your time just because someone's talked about stress again. But if it looks like there's a genuine opportunity there, there's something happening, you're seeing something quite a lot in the news, a celebrity has just done something related to some content that you did and it's going everywhere, that's when it's worth popping a few emails together. And if you don't have hours and hours available for it, then limit yourself to 10, 15 minutes just to do this. And check for competitors' content disappearing. So if you've got a similar study out there already that was done 10 years ago, you just updated it, or there's a piece of content kind of similar to yours that loads of people are linking to where you've not managed to secure the links, monitor it. Particularly with content that doesn't sit within the main framework of the site or it doesn't sit on the blog, it tends to be a little microsite that sits off on its own and it's not really templated the same as anything else. When sites re-platform or migrate or change domains, I would need more than the two hands I've got to count the number of times I've seen content disappear from websites. So you can stick it into something like Little Warden, the URL, and you'll get an email every day if something changes on that page. So if it goes down or there's a dodgy redirect or anything like that. Then what you're looking at is it's broken link building basically, except a little bit more proactively. Instead of going out and finding pages that are broken already and building a resource, you've already got the resource. So you can send, again, just a few quick emails saying, notice you're linking to this, it's actually disappeared, we've got something kind of similar. By the same token, monitor your own content. It's a little bit awkward when you notice 4 months after it happened that the most linked to page on your website disappeared when your client changed domain. So monitor your own content that way too. Old projects get forgotten quite a lot. And then I really want to revisit this targets thing, because this really kind of bugs me. This idea that for 3/4 of us, hitting targets isn't even close to being consistent. And I really don't think we're bad as an industry at outreach. If you'd asked me 8 years ago, I'd have said it's because we're all still using article spinners. I'd have said it's because we're all releasing content like the benefits of waste management or the history of accounting in Wigan. Like, that would have been the reason for this then. But now, some of the content that gets released by SEO agencies is some of the best you'll see. It's really good. So I don't think we're bad at outreach. I think we're bad at setting targets and selling the long-term value of content in. I worked with salespeople for 9 years in an agency, and salespeople and I didn't always gel. And I think part of it is because they're under pressure to get the sale. And the sale is easier to get. I'm not just talking about selling to clients. I'm talking about selling to stakeholders too. The sale is easier to get if you can say, this is what you're going to get in a month. 10 million bazillion links in 3 days. So I think we have to work closer with stakeholders and salespeople and clients to actually explain the long-term value of content. But one of the changes that I made about 4 years ago working in an agency was to address targets, because we weren't hitting them quite as consistently as I would have liked. So I made them bigger, and everyone was like, just told you I'm not hitting my target, so you've doubled it. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? There's method to the madness, though. If you've got a campaign or a project where the client's expecting 10 solid pieces of coverage and you hit number 10, you feel like you're finished. That's it, it's done. If you hit number 10 and your target's 100, you kind of feel like you're still at the start line. There's still that focus and energy and momentum in the project. And we're human, okay? So while some people look at a target as the bare minimum and they get there and they're more enthused, more often than not what I encounter is people who look at a target as the end. And it's just a mindset thing. It's a human thing. So my view is that actually, by having more ambitious targets, even if you set separate targets for the team as to what the client's aware of, or separate targets for the team as to what the stakeholders are aware of, makes more ambitious teams. The caveat to that was that we'd have longer to hit those targets. Now I'm typically measured over a year on what kind of coverage I'll get. I'd like it to be about 10, but I'm having no joy yet. So I guess in summary, sell the long-term value of content, treat those content assets like the most important landing pages on your website. If 50% of your link profile is centered around content, don't lose that. It's as important as your core commercial landing pages. And if you're struggling with targets, try making them bigger. Thank you.